indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. At this time, is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll go to the verification of the posting of the agenda.
Julianne Iconen, for the record, the agenda was posted on the 28th day of December between the hours of 1 and 5 o'clock p.m. at the locations listed on the agenda in accordance with statutes.
Thank you. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda as revised?
I move to approve the agenda as revised.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Could
Motion
you
carries.
put in the actual meeting what you revised it to? Because I believe the revision was done before the meeting started.
Could I get an alteration to that motion?
So I move to revise the agenda by moving 9A to first on the agenda and delaying one other option, C, 7C, until 8:45 due to the time frame that they're not
Second
available.
that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Could I get a approval of the minutes of the meeting held on December 7th, 2023?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of December 7th, 2023.
Second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving 9A up to the beginning. Consideration of possible action, recess the regular meeting to conduct a litigation meeting.
I move to recess.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion
Aye.
carries. And we'll switch over.
Grab that door for us, please. Thank you.
Order, we're going to move to item 7C, consideration of possible action, presentation by Placer.ai, and approval of service agreement with Placer AI in the amount of $24,000. Now you can go ahead, Will.
Wonderful. Well, again, thanks so much for the opportunity to meet with the entire board here at Churchill County. My name is Will Chambers. I'm an account executive at Placer AI. I've had a couple discussions already with Jorge, with Jim, with some other department heads, and so the purpose for my time today really will just be to show a bit of a show and tell, right? Kind of give a similar presentation that I showed to Jorge and Jim, as well as some others there at the county. Make sure that the board has an idea of who Placer is and what we do and what kind of services we provide. And this can be as interactive as needed. So if anyone has questions at any time, feel free to just interrupt me, and happy to help with any questions that you guys might have. So let me go ahead. What I'm going to do now is share my screen. Let's see here. And if someone could just let me know when they can actually see what's on the screen, that would be great.
We can see it.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just give you some quick background on who Placer is, right? So Placer is the Placer is the market leader in the location analytics space. So what we do is we leverage mobile location data to provide market intelligence and visitation insights into any physical place in the United States. The way that we do this is we are harnessing data from millions of mobile devices, and then we anonymously aggregate that data, excuse me, so that we can learn about any place, right? Whether it is a retailer or a shopping center or an event center, a neighborhood, even any road, street, or highway. So not only can we tell you how many people came to a given place, we can also tell you where these people live, where they work, and where else they like to go. In about 4 years, we've now become the leading data provider in the location analytics space. So we have more than 3,000 customers across 30 different industries, including more than 900 now within the civic space. So that ranges from cities and counties to economic development corporations, downtown associations, tourism boards, chambers of commerce, you name it. The civic space is our largest sector, and it's also our fastest growing. We're adding about 20 to 25 new civic customers each week. So just to give you an idea of who we're working with, right? That ranges from, let's say, massive cities like Seattle, Denver, Washington, D.C., to cities and counties that might just have, a few thousand in population. Now, within Nevada, some of our customers include the Elko County Convention and Visitors Authority. We're working with the town of Tonopah. We work with the city of Reno, the downtown Reno Business Improvement District, just to name a few, right? Now, we initially got our success in the world of commercial real estate. So if you're familiar with names like JLL or CBRE, Cushman & Wakefield, they're all Placer customers. From the success we had in that space, we started to see big name retailers come on board. Target, Best Buy, Dollar General, Albertsons, Walmart, they're all Placer customers, right? From the success there, then we started to expand more into the civic space as well as other organizations. We've only been selling the data now for the last 4 years, but we're the only company in the space that spent the first 4 years prior to that optimizing our algorithm for accuracy, as well as we went ahead and we built a privacy first panel. So the panel where we get all of our data from, which I'll be showing you here briefly, doesn't collect any person identifying information, right? This panel consists of partnerships across dozens of mobile applications and critical mobile app partners that work exclusively with Placer. So the panel where we get our data from, it's made up of 25 million mobile devices. It accounts for roughly 9% of the US population. So statistically speaking, it's very significant. It allows us to have the most accurate data on the market, right? Now, this next slide I'll show you here before we jump into the platform. These are essentially the 9 main use cases for our civic customers, right? The 9 most popular purposes for which our customers find value in our data. And again, not knowing how interactive we want to get with the different, county commissioners and who is there on the board. But these are essentially the 9 main use cases for which people are finding value in our data. And I've discussed some of these with Jorge and with Jim. If anyone has any suggestions, anyone that's there, it's like, hey, I'm curious about this, feel free to call it out. Otherwise, I can just kind of move on to the platform and give a bit of a demonstration here.
Great. You can go ahead to the demonstration, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll just go ahead and dive in then. So what we see here now, this map of the United States, this is the Explorer view within Placer, right? So everything that's in Placer is searchable or queryable by name or by address. Just like you would use Google Maps to find a property, you can come right here into Placer and do the exact same thing. So just as an example, if I wanted to search for Fallon, which I know is the county seat for Churchill County, I could do this, right? Now, we geofenced the entire country back in 2017. So that means we have coverage across the United States. Over the last 3 years or so, we've gone through and we've indexed about 85% of existing retail locations and large attraction sites into the platform that can just be clicked on and opened in real time, right? So anything you're seeing here with these larger logos or any of these purple dots, these are all examples of points of interest that are in the platform right now. Now, we can also geofence any physical polygon shape, right? So if we wanted to examine a parade or a public park, a shopping center, a hotel, an entire city, right? We're not at all limited by size or by shape. If there's ever a property that we don't have in the platform today, not to worry as well. We can always add that into the dashboard in a couple of ways, right? So our customers request new points of interest through our support team here. Our support team brings those back in 24 to 48 hours. We also have the option to create points of interest on the fly. This create point of interest tool here. I'll show you really quickly how this would work in a new tab here. This is essentially, let's say that, if should Churchill County become a customer and someone was using the platform and needed data on a property immediately, right? We can't wait the 24 or 48 hours for our support team to bring that point of interest back. We do have this option to draw a point of interest on the fly. And this is actually what we did to examine the 3C event complex with Jorge on the original call that I had with him. So let's just say, for example, I'm not sure what these properties here are, but if this was a point of interest that, the county wanted to see some data on instantly, we could come right here, we could select create point of interest. And on the fly, we can draw a geofence around this location like this. We can include whatever we want to include. If we want to exclude different buildings, we could do that. Once we have that polygon drawn, we just give it a name and we select save. And then boom, we'll have data for that point of interest now instantly, right? We do prefer to have our customers add points of interest through our support team just because they're going to accurately geofence the property. They're going to validate some of the data before they bring it back, but it is useful to note that we have this option on the fly, right? Now, just because we might be adding a property into the platform today, it doesn't mean that we don't have data on it, right? Because we geofenced the whole country back in 2017, every time that we add a new point of interest and we draw a new polygon, it's going to automatically pull all of that historical data retroactively going back to January 1st of 2017, right? So we're not just going to start collecting data from this point moving forward. And last note here is we're not limited to looking at just one property at a time, right? As a customer, you can add anything you want into Placer. So we could geofence different block areas of Fallon or part of your county. We could look at downtowns, the entire county, add in all your parks, take a look at roads, completely unlimited from that aspect as well. Now, again, for today's show and tell, I figured I would actually just go back to our 3C event complex, which is what Jorge and I examined initially, right? So we went ahead and we drew this geofence around this event complex space. Now, the data will always default to, when we open up a new point of interest here, the data will always default to the last 12 months, right? However, I mentioned that we have historical data, right? So if we wanted to examine the 3C event complex, we could examine this data as far back as January 1st of 2017. And we're also going to have visitation data for the 3C event complex as recently as Sunday, the 31st, right? So this is the most near real-time data in the industry. It's a 3 or a 4 day lag period, and we update it every day. Tomorrow when I log in, I'm going to have data for Monday, right? So on and so forth. For the purpose of this one, we'll just kind of stick to the data for the last 12 months. Now, another note
Will,
here.
this is Jim.
Hey, Jim.
Could you do me a favor in looking at this 3C data as to give them kind of a show and tell? Can you look at the data as it was for the 31st, 4 days ago?
Absolutely. So we could select individual days. We can do that with a custom date range. So the way this would work, if I just select that, we can then select apply. Now, I will say when we're looking at specific days, if there wasn't an event there, if we didn't have visitation, we may get a low panel threshold, but it looks like for maybe New Year's, if there was a New Year's event,
There was.
we actually had 4.2 thousand visitors. So there's a perfect example of examining just one individual day. Again, we can go back and look as far back as 2017. We could be comparing visitation to this event center year over year, or looking at different date ranges. So when we're examining just the 31st, we have 4.2 thousand visitors that day. So, and that kind of leads me to this metrics portion, right? That visitors line is the first one I'll always show. So Placer is accounting for 4.2 thousand individual visitors. Now, if we were looking at a longer date range, we'd probably see a different number for total of visits, right? Because we're only looking at one day. We don't have return visitors. People are just coming one time, right? But if we were examining this, quickly, let me just set this back to the last 12 months to kind of give you an example. If I do that, once my Wi-Fi wants to load for us here, there we go. So we're now over the last 12 months for the 3C event complex. Placer is accounting for almost 55,000 individual visitors, and they visited for a total of 264,000 visits, right? So we're looking at a frequency over that time period of almost 5 times per person, right? Now we get all of these numbers from our panel visits, right? I mentioned earlier about Placer's panel. So this number here, 11.1 thousand panel visits. Panel visits is going to refer to the unique number of mobile devices that's within our panel that Placer physically observed entering this 3C event complex where we drew this geofence and staying for at least 7 minutes, right? So panel visits, that's our ground truth data. It's what we know to be true. And we know this because we're receiving location data from our app partners 24/7, right? So we then take that panel visits number and we use our proprietary algorithm to extrapolate out for the rest of the population. So that's how we are accounting for 55,000 over that last 12 months. But again, if we want to look at that specific day of New Year's Eve, we can update this again, get that number, and now we can start to examine this specific day for this New Year's Eve event that you guys held there, right? Now, actually, let me really quick so I can show you how the trend line works. I should have done that before I switch this back. So if I go back to the last 12 months, I can show you how we can examine visitation to any place over time, right? So what you're seeing here now with this visit trends line is we can aggregate visits to any location on a daily, weekly, or monthly frequency, right? So now we can start to examine the peaks and dips in visitation to the 3C event complex, or again, any location. We're only looking at the event complex right now, but we could be examining any place within Churchill County, right? And we can start to see individual days here. So looks like we had a big event here Saturday, August 26th. I can even select that day and get some insights, right? How many people came? How does it compare to the same day last year or the previous Saturday? What was the weather? Nearby events. Looks like we had this Cantaloupe Festival and County Fair, right? But again, let me take us back to the New Year's Eve day so we can examine some of these other reports and make it specific to this New Year's Day event. Now, I mentioned before, hey, we can tell you where people live and where they work, right? So if I take us over to the trade area tab here, now what we're going to be seeing is a heat map that shows the home locations of everyone that came through the 3C event complex on New Year's Eve day, right? So as I zoom in, we can start to examine what parts of Fallon did the event complex actually draw visitation from, right? We can start to zoom in and get ideas of specific neighborhoods or block areas. I can zoom out and see, okay, we were getting visitation from some of these nearby towns, whether it is Fernley or Silver Spring, Stagecoach. I can continue to zoom out. Anywhere that we see this red pocket here is going to be indicative of visitation. So we're pulling from Reno, we're pulling from the Walker River Reservation, from Hawthorne. Let's see if I can zoom out and get a couple more from further away. Here's some from the Bay Area in San Francisco and San Jose. We've got some from Elko, Twin Falls, Idaho, a couple here from Oregon. And it looks like that might be the extent of just that day. But, you know, again, when I looked at that 12-month range, let me do that really quickly again and show you how quickly we can start to examine these things. When it comes to visitation to this event complex over that 12-month range, now we're seeing visitation from Idaho, Portland, Seattle, some in Wyoming here, South Dakota, Colorado, where I'm located, Phoenix, Arizona, So this can be really useful for examining, whether it's tourism, right? Understanding where people are actually coming from when they visit Churchill County, what specific cities or counties they're coming from, right? I'll take us back to that specific day again. Now we can also examine the visitation more granularly than just this heat map, right? So if I want to open up this GIS feature here, this will open up in a new tab. And now what we'll be seeing is the visitation on New Year's Day, New Year's Eve day. We can now see this at a dot density view. So we can understand now down to the census block level where visitation was coming from. Now, each one of these dots is an aggregation of 50 visits. And there is a blur radius, right? So we don't want anyone from the county or any of our customers to be able to go and knock on someone's door and say, thanks for visiting our New Year's Eve event, right? But now we can start to get really granular to understand what parts of Fallon are we getting visitation from. Maybe there's a gap here locally where we were hoping to see more visits, and we can target that for, let's say, marketing campaigns, right? Again, being able to view this at a much more granular level down to that census block level. And we can also examine this visitation from a zip code perspective, right? So now I can hover over any of these individual zip codes. We can see what the number of visits were that came from that zip code. We have a list here broken down on the right. So showing the top zip codes in general. We can also look at year-over-year change. So if we want to see how this New Year's event compared to the previous year, I can toggle this on. And now we're seeing any of these zip codes in green shows where we've gained visitation compared to the previous New Year's, right? In red, these are zip codes where we've lost visitation. So again, a lot of different use cases we can utilize this from that perspective, right?
Will, using that same model, can you jump over and kind of show where the folks that came for New Year's, what businesses they were frequenting in that day?
Absolutely, yes. So if I take you to this visitor journey section, this is where we're going to see exactly that, right? So if we want to understand where else people were going, right, that came to our event, we're going to see this visitor journey section. So this first report here is just going to show what are the top 5 prior and post locations, right? So where were people coming from the most, or where did they go after? So the majority of people were just coming from home, right? But we do have people coming from this pilot travel center at Fernley. That's about 4% of the visitation for that day. They were staying at the Holiday Inn Express in Fallon, right? So maybe that's important for understanding where people are staying. I don't know if you guys collect like a bed tax or something like that, but that's the most popular hotel for that event. People were coming from the Sandwinds Resorts. Now, those are only the top 5. And post, right, they went to Boomers. I don't know if that's maybe a restaurant. They went to Stillwater Plaza, Best Western. Now, again, only the top 5 there, but we have here a list now with 27 locations just for this day. Again, we're only looking at the 31st, right? But we have now 27 locations showing where exactly people were coming from directly before and directly after. So we can start to examine where these people were going. So when it comes to this January 31st event, lots of people went to Sandwinds after, or they went to Boomers. Maybe some specific locations, Subway, right? We can also start to understand what these people's brand affinities are, right? So what we're going to see here now this might be more useful if I look at a different date range. So just to give you an example of how we can see what let's say for, I'll just set this to the last 6 months, just kind of as a quick example, because it's going to give us a few more data points, right? So over that last 6 months, what were the most common locations or brands that our visitors prefer, right? So what we'll see, we have both favorite chains and we have favorite places. Now the difference between that is going to be favorite chains is going to show the brand affinity of our visitors, right? So of all the national chains nationwide, which ones do they prefer or frequent the most, right? So if I go to favorite chains, the way to read this is 93.4% of our visitors over that 6-month period at one point visited a Walmart, right? So that's pretty standard. That's their number one brand, right, that they associate with. Same thing with McDonald's, Safeway. Now, we could filter this by category. So maybe we want to examine just where do they get their groceries? We could apply that and see what types of grocers they prefer. Now, maybe we want to get more granular and see the types of individual places they're going, right? So now we have favorite places. The number one location is this outlet, the outlets at Legends in Sparks. So that makes up about 70% of the visitors over that 6-month period at one point visited this shopping center, which is 50 miles away. So that's interesting. But they prefer the Walmart here in Fallon, Stillwater Plaza. Now, again, we can filter this I have 5 pages of data, and we could select dining, right? So maybe we want to understand what specific restaurants the people that come to the event complex prefer, right? So the Walk is the number one location here in Fallon. So that makes up 30% of that visitation over that 6-month period. 30% of those people went to the Walk at some point over that same time. So when it comes to understanding where else people are going, or maybe what the impact is locally on our economy, right? When we host these events, we know that we're going to drive a certain number of people to these local restaurants, whether it's Jerry's or the Walk or this VN Pho, right? Useful for a lot of different things, whether it's identifying sponsorships or just getting an idea of what that impact is locally on our economy. And now I'll show you how we can examine the demographics of visitation as well. So, of course, I mentioned earlier, we don't collect any person identifying information. So we're never going to know where Jim's phone has been or where Jorge's phone has been. But, once we can define the home location of these devices just based off the patterns and the movements of these devices, we can start to define what we would call the true trade area, right? So what I'll do here, I'll set this to like a 3-mile ring radius. Now, the true trade area is what we are defining as the top 70% of visits. So again, we're still looking at the last 6 months. If we want to examine just the 31st, we can do that as well. But for the last 6 months, the top 70% of visitation to the 3C event complex is what you're seeing here in these pink little amoeba shapes, right? So this is what we're defining as the true trade area for the 3C event complex, right? Now, I threw this ring radius method on there. This is kind of the old school method that civic organizations and municipalities might use to measure things like demographics or available population, right? They'd look at who is within this 3 or 5 or 10 mile ring radius, right? But this is really where we start to see the value of mobile data, right? We know that no data is perfectly circular. And if we're examining what's in this 3-mile ring radius, when it comes to the 3C event complex, we know that there are pockets here within 3 miles that we really shouldn't be including as far as who makes up the true trade area for this location. And we also have all these pockets here outside of that 3-mile ring radius, right? Some as far away, as what we're looking here towards Fernley, a couple little pockets here as well. So once we have this true trade area defined, right? Once we have these pink amoeba shapes, we then are able to overlay third-party data sets on top of those, right? So the most simple one to understand is census data, right? So we could take census data and overlay it onto these pink amoeba shapes so that we can start to understand what are the demographics of the people within our true trade area, right? Now, we've also partnered with 30 of the premier third-party data set providers. So these are all examples of data sets that are available for our customers, right? Now, the most popular will be this STI Pop Stats. This is similar to the type of data you'll see with census data, but it's updated more frequently, right? We don't have to wait 2 years for the census to come out anymore. This Pop Stats is much more, it's updated more frequently, and frankly, it's more accurate. Now, with this, we can start to examine the true trade area here on the left compared to what's available in 3 miles, right? So we might think that there's only roughly 13,000 people within 3 miles of the 3C event complex. But now with the power of Placer and mobile data, we can actually see that the 3C event complex over that 6-month period is pulling from a population size of 16,000, right? And we can start to examine this at all these different demographic categories, right? So maybe we want to understand what's the household income for the people that visit our event complex, or what is their ethnicity, right? I can select this. We can start to examine all these different demographic categories. I don't have 3 hours to talk through every single data set with you all, but there's an ocean of demographic and psychographic data sets where we can start to examine everyone within Churchill County, or everyone that lives in Fallon, or everyone that comes and visits, an attraction site locally, right? Completely unlimited from that aspect. And I showed this report on our last call, and I know some of the transportation people were involved, and so they found some interest in this. We have this vehicle traffic volume report. So what we've done is we've partnered with a third-party data provider called INRIX. INRIX collects GPS data from cars, right? And so with that, we are able to select any major segment of road or highway, right? So I can look at this North Allen Road, and if I select that portion of the road, we can see how many cars were on it during this 6-month period, right? Or what's the average daily volume, right? The average daily volume is nearly 3,000 cars. Here are the peak hours, right, or times of day where we see traffic. These darker squares are going to be the highest amounts of cars. We could set this to see directionally if we want to see, who are the people that are coming from north to south, right, or south to north. We can start to examine it that way, right? We also have this planned development feature. So with this, we can actually see developments that are popping up within any area, right? So I can select any of these. We can see what the development is. So we have this residential development that's in the planning stage, this Old Stone Ranch. We have this Oasis Academy High School in the construction phase, right? So with this, it's just a way to get a snapshot of, what's the future of any area going to look like based off of developments, right? We also have this crime profile report. Looks like we don't have many reported crimes here locally around this 3C event complex. Now, there could be a few different reasons for this. We collect this data from validated sources like police departments and other sources. It could just be that these crimes aren't being reported, or it could just be that Fallon is just a really fantastic place to live from a crime perspective. I live in Denver, Colorado. If we were looking at where I live, this map would look very different. I can tell you that much. Now, the last thing I'll show you here, I can take you to our overview page. So this is kind of a 30,000-foot view of all, the reports that I just showed you. And we can start to examine visitation in some different ways. So first we can see what routes people took to get to any location. So when it comes to how do they get to the 3C event complex, we can now start to see which roads they traveled to get there, right? So anything you see in red or orange is going to be the most popular roads taken. As we get further out, you'll see them start to get yellow, orange, and blue, right? To understand how people are traveling. Maybe this could be useful for identifying, additional parking for our event complex or anything like that, right? We can also examine what is the visitation to this complex hourly, right? What are the peak hours of the day? So over that 6-month period, the peak hours were, it was 6 p.m., right? Now, if we wanted to look at this, again, specifically on the 31st, we'll see if maybe this changes, right? So if we're going to look at New Year's Eve, now we can maybe see what the peak hours were. So I don't know if people were waiting to watch the ball drop there. We'll find out here in a second. Looks like it. So this is a nighttime event, it appears. So peak hours were between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. And we did have some people here past 11. And here's the people that stayed all the way until the ball dropped, excuse me, right? We can also examine daily visits. Now, again, we're only looking at Sunday the 31st, so that's why it's showing. But if I went back to that 6 months, we'd be able to see, what the highest peak day is when it comes to visitation to your event complex. We can see what the average length of stay. So for this event on the 31st, the average length was 200 minutes, right? So basically 3 hours. So that's useful, right? Now, everything I've shown you so
Hey,
far,
Will?
that's
This is Jim.
Sure.
I'm gonna cut you
Jim.
off. I think you had them at hello.
all right. Are there any
Don't
questions
oversell
that
us.
you
I
guys
think
have?
we got some support, it looks like here, so we may go ahead and move on to the action.
Okay, understood.
Thank you.
Anything else that you guys need from me while I'm here?
Any questions or comments for Will? Could I get a motion, please?
I move to enter into a service agreement with Placer.ai as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Will, for your time. Very interesting technology there. We'll move on to agenda item number 7A, public hearing, consideration of possible action. Ordinance 2023B, number 7, an ordinance added sections 3.12.024, pregnancy, childbirth, and related medical conditions, and 3.12.026, reasonable accommodations for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, and modifications to section 3.32140, standby, and 3.36.050, holiday, of Title III of the Churchill County Code for those employees under the direct and indirect jurisdiction of the Board of County Commissioners to the extent of the law permitted by the state of Nevada. Joff?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Joff Stark, Human Resources Director for Churchill County. And here this morning for this public hearing, we did the first reading last month, and we're here for the public hearing. Again, many of these changes are changes that came about as a result of law changes, and we're finally incorporating them into the Churchill County Code. The pregnancy, childbirth, and related medical conditions, we've already been doing that since 2017 when the law was enacted, but we are now integrating it into Title III. There's also, to me, a very important change, although not a lot of language, but reasonable accommodation for victims of domestic violence or sexual assault. We need to make sure that is in our code. We have actually utilized this already before this was ever put into code, but we want to make sure it is properly documented in the code. Standby, we talked about Central Nevada Health District. They are requesting to have one person to be able to have that person on standby to respond to emergency calls, and so this would let them to designate someone for that, and they need to make sure they have the money budgeted to do that. And then the last one has to do with Juneteenth, which is June 19th of each year. That is now a legal holiday in Nevada, and we just want to make sure it's recognized in Title III for our employees. With that, I will take any questions you may have.
Is there any public comment? Any questions from board or staff? I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve Bill 2023-B, Ordinance 7 as presented.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Moving on to item number 7B, public hearing, consideration and possible action, Bill 2023C, Ordinance 12 and 13, an ordinance amending Title V of the Churchill County Code to clarify the persons required to receive business license for special events, update persons required to receive employment certification, remove the transmittal of fingerprint records by the sheriff to unauthorized parties pursuant to Nevada revised statute, amend liquor license fees to be due on an annual basis, and other related matters thereto. This one is...
Thank you, Mr.
Joe.
Chair. This is Joe Sanford for the record. This is a cleanup ordinance for a number of pieces related to the business licensing and the transmittal of inappropriate records for fingerprint records. And then the second piece is related to the amendment of the liquor license fees to be an annual fee. That was at the recommendation of the sheriff, who has received some public complaints related to that. And then finally, the removal of requirement for employment certificates is to put us in a position similar to other surrounding counties where a person who is going to be employed in an alcoholic beverage serving capacity does not have to get an employment certificate through the sheriff before they can begin serving.
Thank you, Joe. Is there any public comment? Any questions from board or staff?
Joe, on that, do they still need the employment certificate, or we're just waiving that all together and it's up to the employer to actually certify these employees, right?
As it's written, it will be up to the employer to ensure that they're
Not a prohibited person.
not a prohibited person.
You okay with that, Sheriff? Yeah, if you want.
So Sheriff Richard Ecox for the record. Thank you for letting me talk about this and for entertaining these changes at our request. So the current process, not to beat it to dead horse, but the current process requires that if you're a business owner and you're hosting an event in the county as the liquor provider, that all of the people that work for you must get a liquor license. And that creates a lot of confusion for those businesses that are in the city, that do business within the city as well as within the county. And so what we end up finding is that last minute, we have a lot of their staff now trying to get liquor licenses, and so it either they get them or else they just don't, and then they're serving without, and so it becomes an enforcement issue and a problem. And so we're just trying to take away some confusion. We reached out to surrounding counties and found that they're doing it the way that we're proposing. The city does it the way that we're proposing. And so we're just trying to make it to where we're not a stumbling block to the economy and to create confusion for those businesses and those people that are trying to conduct business at county events. And since we have the After 3C, there's a lot of that. And so we're just trying to clean it up.
Thank you, Sheriff. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion.
I move to approve Bill 2023-C, ordinance 12 and 13 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 7D, consideration of possible action, approval of a subrecipient agreement between Churchill County Social Services and the Central Nevada Health District in the amount of $281,080 to provide lab courier services to rural Nevada and purchase a courier vehicle not to exceed $37,500. Shannon?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Happy New Year. For the record, Shannon Ernst, Churchill County Social Services. So as we launched the lab here in Churchill, which is a satellite of UNR State Lab, we found that there was a barrier to courier services. So there's no pickup for specimens in Mineral County, Pershing County, certain areas of that. And so as we worked with the state, moving forward with the lab, we found that there was funding available through the STI, which is the sexually transmitted infectious disease, that we could do courier services. So the Central Nevada Health District was able to apply for the funds, receive those funds, and provide us a subrecipient agreement to do the courier services. This is not just limited to the Central Nevada Health District providers. It is actually going to be open to all the hospitals and everyone. We will actually create a route so that there is a pickup all through rural Nevada 5 days a week. And so this is approving that subrecipient agreement that was brought before Central Nevada Health District at their last meeting to allow us to do this service and purchase a vehicle. The funds we are receiving support a 1 full-time FTE, which Joff will be working on that job description. And then we will purchase the vehicle, and all the maintenance is covered through this grant for a 2-year period. Any questions I can answer?
Go ahead.
Is this just going to be delivered to the Churchill County Laboratory, or is it going to go to other labs too in the area?
No, this will actually just be for the lab here. If we find that we pick up a specimen that we cannot process, it would go on to Reno. And so that courier would take it up there, or that their courier service would pick it up from us. There's a lot of those details in there that we need to work with UNR on. But that was one of the biggest things when we wanted to expand here, was the cost for the courier services that Reno could not support.
Any other questions? Public comment? I'll take a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the subrecipient agreement, to authorize the chair to sign the same, and to authorize the Social Services Director to purchase the vehicle as presented.
Second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Did anyone want to pull out any of the letters received?
No.
Okay, moving on to item 10A, new business, consideration of possible action, adoption of resolution 01-2024, a resolution establishing the travel expenses and substance allowed for Churchill County effective January 1st, 2024, noting the new mileage rate of 67 cents per mile and per diem rate of $59 per day.
Thank you. This is just a housekeeping item. Every year, the IRS comes out with new mileage rates, and the per diem has not changed, but the mileage rate went up 1.5 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Any questions, comments, public comment? I'll take a motion, please.
I move to approve Resolution 01-2024, establishing the travel expenses and subsistence allowance for Churchill County effective January 1st, 2024, noting the new mileage rate of 67 cents per mile and per diem rate of $59 per day.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Anything on the consent agenda that someone wanted to pull? Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I will make a motion to approve the consent agenda as listed.
Second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to number 12, consider anyone want to add anything for a future agenda item? Seeing none, we'll move on to 13, Commissioner and Management Staff Report. I have nothing to add. Buzz, do you have anything?
Yeah, I attended the Carson Water Subconservancy District meeting after our last meeting. It was a good meeting. It was short.
Justin?
I have nothing to pass at this time.
Jim, you have anything to add?
Nothing.
Sherry?
Nothing, thank you.
Joe?
Nothing.
Linda?
I'm the one for it. We had our third installment of property taxes due the day after New Year's, which is always a fun time. Busy, of course, with that. We also are going to be mailing out our presidential preference mail ballots in about a couple weeks. And we've had a lot of calls in our office regarding caucus. We won't answer caucus questions. We will defer them to parties that are, the party that is running the caucus for any questions they have on that. We also have, if anybody is asking, you can always have them contact our office. We do provide that information on our website. And we've also had Ann, who has been posting it on our social media, so it can help defer some of those calls. However, just have them contact our office. Other than that, that's it. Any questions?
I don't think so. Thank you. Julianne?
I did want to say in a couple of past board meetings that I never really spoke, so things are going really well for me. I get a little stressed at night, and I think of what things are in the middle of the night, but I guess that's a good thing because it's processing through my brain. And I want to thank Pam and Linda for my opportunity here, and everyone else. Thank you.
Happy to have you here. Pam? Sheriff? Okay. At this time, is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to our department tours. HR's up first, okay. Oh, we got lots of things to sign. I think so.